Okay, now let's try some watercolor techniques. We're gonna take off your paper into at least 9 sections. I wanna see at least 10 different techniques, so you're gonna need to double up. Let's start with a flat wash. We're just gonna have some nice wet paint on the surface here, and then we're gonna experiment with timing and color control. So the first one is wet paint on wet paper. We call that wet on wet. Next is wet on damp. The paper and the water underneath has dried a little bit. And then wet on dry. Notice the difference. Gradients are used all the time for backgrounds, for shadows, and basically you start with a nice solid stroke of color and then you're going to use water to make it lighter as it goes down. You can also tilt your paper up like I was just doing to kind of help the water dry that way or the paint dry that way. Now for a variegated gradient, this is 2 colors. So you're going to start with one color on one end and another color on the other end. Be careful with complements because they'll turn brown in the middle. If you're not sure what to use, maybe stick with warm or cool colors to make sure that they blend well. Analogous colors are colors next to each other on the color wheel. Now we're going to try dripping water, and simply what you do is start with some paint and then just put a drop of water and leave it alone. It'll create an interesting texture. On the other side, we're dropping paint, so starting with water and dropping paint. I made a mistake and didn't record this, so this is the lifting method. So basically you're just lifting paint off the surface. You can use your brush, you can use a paper towel. You can create some interesting effects like for grass or hair or other textures. Next, we have something called charging. Charging is basically placing your paint kind of in an area that is wet and letting it kind of bleed and be interesting. So you can kind of think of it like supercharging the color. You can use multiple colors or you can kind of use the same colors. Dragging is similar, but you're actually going to drag your paint across the surface. Next, I really want to think about layers. Layers are such a critical part of watercolor because watercolor is transparent. When you're using it at an advanced level, you're thinking about how the layers interact with each other. So on the left, I have the same color just gradually getting darker as I add more and more layers. Right now, I'm putting yellow on top of purple. Those are complementary colors, and you'll see how the purple kind of neutralizes. It's less intense. Even though yellow is a light color, as a top layer, it makes a difference. All right, this is masking medium, or sometimes called drawing gum. Basically, this is just liquid rubber, and what it's going to do is you can put it in unique shapes, different than tape. Tape blocks things off, in a straight line or a torn edge. This gives you a lot more options to put down the color. You'll want to make sure it's really dry before you put colors on top, and I'm just kind of playing with some different mediums. I'm putting some lines across. I'm doing some scumbling, which just means kind of using those irregular shapes. One of the scumblings, I've used a spray bottle one. I'm just kind of going with it. Basically, I want you to use today to really explore. This is a dry brush method, so I'm choosing brushes that have an interesting kind of texture to them, and then just use dry paint, well, kind of dry, over the top to kind of get more of a rough texture. You can use an eraser to get the masking fluid off because it's rubber. It'll kind of help get it started, but be really careful. It can rip your paper just like tape. With tape, if you use this kind of angle and keep it flat against the table, that is typically the best way to do it. If you have little torn marks, this is practice, learn from it. You can also use a glue stick to kind of get it back into place. All right, once you have all the tape off and you have this gorgeous example of experiments, I want you to annotate your paper. That means you're going to label the different things you've used. You can make notes to yourself. I want to be able to clearly see what techniques you are trying. You can use techniques from here. You can use techniques that you find online or in the books we have in the room. But please make sure that you make it clear to me that you know what it is you're trying so that you can use them again in the future. With the masking fluid, I have one more thing to add here now that it's dry. It gives you a nice white space, but you don't have to leave it white. That's a great place to add other colors on a clean surface.